So that's really what I wanted to do was to recap the Tom Ferry link that I sent. But first of all, just kind of start out and say, since we had our conversation last week about, you know, the future of buyer commissions and whatnot, who's had a conversation with a buyer client this week or since then where it came up, and how did you handle it? Anybody?
I've discussed it with a couple people. And I just asked them, have you, or have you probably heard some of the headlines about the National Association of Realtors and changes to the real estate commission. Have you heard that? One guy said yes, the other guy said no, and I just told them what it was, and they had no problem with it. One guy said, "Well, I wouldn't work for free." So, you
Huh.
know, I think it, like we said last week, and if you watch the Tom Ferry thing, which I would encourage you to do, it's only an hour. Make the time to do it to benefit your business. If you make it a big deal, they'll think it's a big deal, just like we talked about last week.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good point. I actually had a seller bring it up that I have under contract. And, she was like, "Well, you guys aren't going to get paid going forward." And I was like, "People will still get paid. It's all negotiable. It always has been." And she was like, "Oh, okay, well, good." And that was the long and short of it. I've talked to a few buyers, hasn't really come up. We're looking
Yeah.
at new construction anyway, so it's nothing to really think about. Well, actually,
It,
it didn't come up when we sat down more than a week ago, and I knew he was looking at new construction and told him, you know, so.
Mhm. I had a buyer, it was last week that it happened, and we were working and looking at houses, and he said, "Oh, you better hurry up and find me a house because if you don't before July, you don't get paid." And it's just interesting to hear their perspective and how warped it can be just from what they hear in the news. And I kind of shared with him that, there's a story that you hear out on the internet and in the news, and then there's the real story and what it really means. And as soon as I shared it with him, he was like, "Oh, that's not what they're portraying." And I'm like,
Not at all, right?
always a story in the middle.
Yeah, imagine that. Well, let's jump into this because I've got some other stuff to do today. I'm doing my BIC up today, which is going to be super fun, starting at 1:30. And if I'm going to be productive at all, I've got to get stuff done before then. And I'm sure you guys want to get some stuff done too. So let me share this. So, like Brandon said, definitely encourage you guys to go in and watch the actual Tom Ferry thing, but we're not going to do that today. What I want to do is go through the supplemental slides that kind of came with it and talk about some of these things. So, one thing I love about Tom Ferry is he always talks about, what's happening in the grand scheme of things, right? I feel like he does a good job of not focusing on such micro stuff, but it's more of a macro approach. And he talks about how there are different factors affecting the industry. And this is a great slide to start that conversation off. Obviously, contracts and compensation, which we've talked about, it is an election year that always impacts everything. Rate cuts or the lack thereof, or we'll see what happens. Pent up demand, which I think is very clear. And then a lack of inventory, which is definitely a real actual thing. A stat saw from one of the things I constantly follow and have been following was, back in like 2008, they were seeing on average about 250,000 new listings hit the market. And over the same time frame in 2024 now, it's like 55,000 over that same given time frame. So that's a huge drop in listings just compared to what was happening 20 years ago or 16 years ago. But things we want to focus on from our conversation is, have some more clarity on these things that are going on, but more so, some of the action items that we talked about last week. There's some other supplemental slides that we'll jump to when we get to it. I think the best approach is just to realize that change is consistent and we can prove it. This is what, can you imagine working in real estate when you got one of these bad boys every week or every month? And this was how you knew what was for sale, unless you drove by and looked at every sign in the yard. Can you imagine what that was like? I love to tell the story. I remember going to my granddad's office on the beach, and he had a cork board on the wall, and there were Polaroids of listings. Polaroids, fantastic, love it. So we went from this, which is basically a phone book of listings, to this, where everything's at your fingertips. And people thought, well, I don't need a real estate agent anymore. I can find a house. Turns out finding the house isn't really that important of a thing, because everybody can find a house. It's not about finding a house. It's at everyone's fingertips. It's about negotiating the process. Paper maps to an app, right? I used to deliver pizza in college, and there was a huge map on the wall, and you had to go find the place before you left the building, so you knew where you were going, unless you had a map in your car. So it was like, go, F and then 3, and that's where the house is. So you found the street. So now go find it. It's crazy how things change, and we think it's going to upend the world, but things keep moving along. I know everybody loves to make the joke about how teachers used to tell us, you're not going to have a calculator with you everywhere you go. Well, we have that now. And even more so, we've got these handy dandy mortgage calculators that make it really easy to at least give you a ballpark or estimate, what a payment would be. Taxes are interesting. In Wake County, they did the tax assessment. I haven't heard back from my challenge, by the way. I guess they're not gonna play ball with me. But what happens when the government increases taxes? Well, they waste more money, I guess.
Yeah.
What did you do during the pandemic? Now, Connor and Ellen, you guys weren't really in real estate during the pandemic, but you were working to some degree. So how did you shift? Because you had to shift if you were working, right? Because things change for everybody. Connor, you were in in-person service industry.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah. You got shut down, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you
down
guys,
You were doing behind the scenes haircuts or whatever, right?
Some, but then
Yeah.
it was coming out that like people's salons were like getting shut down. So the only thing we could do was like we were putting hair color in a bottle and setting it outside, and they'd come pick it up and do it themselves. But that was all we could do at the time.
Was real estate a protected industry where you guys
It was.
Yeah,
It
that's what I
was.
thought.
But here's the thing, Ellen. Durham shut it down. You couldn't show houses in Durham County.
yeah. Ellen, I'll give you guys my opinion on that. I was living in Durham at the time, which was very locked down, like a New York or LA. And you couldn't show homes in Durham, first and foremost. Even if you already had a house under contract, you couldn't have an inspection or a walkthrough or appraisal. It was very strange. But I had just left my prior firm and joined Doug like a month before all this happened. Doug had just bought the office in the Triangle, or just signed the lease. And so it was crazy thinking, I thought I was having a good business going in 2019, and here the calendar flips over to 2020. Have I made a mistake by getting in this business, which now I can't do business? Have I made a mistake leaving my old firm to join a new firm where I don't have any book of business? I had only been in real estate for like a year and a half. I didn't have a bunch of past clients. I had 37 closed clients at that time. And then I had the best year I ever had for 2 years in a row because it was just absolute gangbusters. But no one was expecting that when COVID first started. We all thought we were going to be belly up. I was worried. My wife got furloughed for 6 weeks, and I was thinking to myself, well, holy shit, right? And I'm in a bad spot here. But you had to stay positive, and it worked out.
That's right. It did. And I think, never downplay your mindset. I talk to my kids about this when they go play soccer. I can tell you're going to have a bad game if you've got a frumpy attitude going into it. So get your mind in the right place. It's so important. Same thing with prospecting, like we talk about. Same thing with an approach just to your business in general and dealing with some changes. One thing not to do is just ignore it and act like nothing has changed, because things are changing, but the way that we help people is not going to change, because we're already providing value, or at least we should be. I'm not sure what the snowy buffalo is for.
Okay, I can tell you because I was at the conference. So if you don't know, this is actually really cool. The buffalo, when it rains, animals turn and move in the direction away from the rain. The buffalo is the only animal that they've identified that walks the earth that heads towards the rain. And so basically the analogy here is to be a buffalo. When there's turbulence, when there's change, when there's problems, turn around and face them head on instead of burying your head in the sand like the prior slide, or trying to move away from it thinking you can escape it, because you're not.
That's great. I love that. So what must we know? So these are the different slides we're going to go through with some of these other folks, but it is about mindset. Are agents value under attack, or, is it simply time to just adjust our process and the conversation that we have? And again, I stress this, the way we coach and the way we teach is we should be talking about these things already. Now, people may be expecting it more or have more questions now than in the past because it's in the news. But this isn't, a topic or ground that we haven't covered or shouldn't be covering. But we do know we have about 100 days for when this takes place and happens in July, when the commissions are no longer listed in MLS. So here are some dialogues. You guys read up on the new changes and agreements for buying a home 2024. What would be the best for us to sit down, get clear on everything you want from your new home, and then I can share our process and learn the changes and agreements? When would you like to get together? Just putting it out there. Online leads, a little bit different because they're not warm. They don't know you, haven't worked with you before, don't have a personal relationship. Good questions to ask that we should be asking already. How have you been seeing homes? How long have you been looking at homes? Things like that. Have you discussed what agency means with any real estate agents? Do you have 10 minutes to discuss these things as we're now required to explain agency before? Again, in North Carolina, we've had the buyer agency agreement. We've been talking about commission. It's always been in there, or at least for all of us. So it's really not a new thing, but just to stress, that's why we do the consult. That's why we have the strategy session. That's why it's included in there. So we touch on it. We provide a copy of it as we're required to, all of those things. More online leads. Confirming appointments, sending the documents in advance, sending the strategy session stuff in advance. I wish that we had always done this, had always had this digital thing to send out. I think it's so great. Honestly, I love not printing it all the time, because a lot of times I feel like it was a waste to print 40 pages and give to somebody. But I also think it looks really good and attractive, and it kind of makes you want to go through it a little bit because it's not just reading printed text and contracts or agency agreements. And it gives us a chance to show ourselves off a little bit, I think. So I really like it, and I really encourage sharing it. And of course, it's different. Some people won't show homes until they get agency. I always say the first one is free, but hey, before we go out again, this is the next step. It's all about how you set those expectations. Hopefully you guys know that by now. So choose your path. Start talking about it now. Wait until the end of June and then panic and then start talking about it, or wait until after July and look like you don't know what you're talking about and you're late to the game. So, I think with anyone, the script's not going to be the same for everyone that you talk to. My approach is, obviously, full disclosure, I will talk about it, but I will talk about it in the context of the way I am already talking about things. Just like you don't make the working with real estate agents a big deal, because if you do it the wrong way, you're going to scare people off. I'm not going to make a big deal of it because I don't think it is a huge deal taken in the correct context. And I think that's important, just like, because people will mirror your energy and your conversation, and you have to be careful about how people are giving people the opportunity to mirror in a negative direction if you are too negative about things. Any other thoughts on that? Am I talking out of pocket, or you guys agree? I don't expect everybody to do it the same way. I'm just trying to help you understand my mindset and my approach.
You're spot on.
Okay, cool. it really comes down to this, which we talked about last week, and not to beat a dead horse, but it's like shooting free throws. You don't just shoot free throws one day and then you go out and you shoot 90%, right? You got to keep practicing. You got to keep thinking about these things. You got to keep repeating to yourself the importance of showing and demonstrating value. It's about value. How are you providing that value to folks? What makes you different than any other people that are upright that can open a lockbox? So demonstrate it. And just FYI, you don't have to only demonstrate it when you're talking to a client. Don't forget you've got this free magic ad machine to broadcast yourself to all these people. Brandon, what happened to you today or yesterday? You're muted.
Sorry. I woke up this morning and a guy that I've never met in my life that follows me on Instagram sent me a message. I'll read it to you. He said, "Hey Brandon, do you do a lot of business in the Clayton, Cleveland area? I've been following you for a while and you are very informative to the current state of things. I wasn't sure if you would be interested in selling a home and helping me find another." Yeah, I would love to get 2 transactions from you. I've never met this guy in my life. He is married to a girl that I went to high school with that I'm not particularly close to, and apparently they're getting a divorce. I had no idea, but he watches me on social media and he reached out. So let's go. You just never know who's watching you.
But, and somebody once told me everything after the but is bullshit, but they can't watch you if you don't make it and put it out there.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're doing that. Basically what you're now doing, which we've always done, is you have to think about every interaction is you're applying for a job. You're applying for a job every time you pick up the phone and call somebody new. Every time you have a first time appointment with someone or a subsequent appointment if you don't have them under agency, right? You're applying for a job. So be prepared to articulate that value you're delivering to your client and to be able to explain the process and the contracts and how the other side is going to approach it.
I have a quick question.
Please.
So Charles, I don't think he's on here, but he reached out the other day and he wanted to know, and maybe I should know this, but I don't. What documents are they updating for the coming year? Do we know that yet? Have
Don't
we
know
seen
yet.
them? Okay, all right.
I haven't seen anything about that yet. Brandon, I know you pay closer attention to some of those emails than I do from like the real estate commission. Make sure you let us know if you see anything about updates to documents, but they're usually done in July and you've got like 90 days to start using the new documents, but I haven't seen anything yet about what's going to be included in those. There's usually a session that JBOR hosts, which I've attended in the past, that just kind of covers the new documents. There's also usually a summary that we'll do in a mastermind that goes over the specific changes to the documents. And then I'll update, our templates and everything as necessary to plug in the new documents.
Okay, yeah, I just assumed there would be some major changes with the documents.
I'm sure there's going to be like a big red paragraph by the commission part of the agency.
Sure.
And probably in the listing agreement too.
Okay.
But what that language is, I don't know yet.
Okay.
It will probably say something along the lines of, it's negotiable as it's always been, there's no set fee, etc. If I had to guess. But again, provide your value, tell your folks what you're going to do for them. Again, you're now applying for the job. You've always applied for the job, but have that mindset. Now you cannot show homes without a signed agreement, not in North Carolina, but that should be a standard you hold yourself to, at least after a first appointment. That's what I coach. You should really do that, to watch out for yourself, but also, so you're doing right by your client. It goes both ways. It protects you and them, right? Which we've discussed before. So make sure you're doing that.
Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I feel like I have so many questions.
That's what we're here for. Let's answer.
Okay, so after July, I've showed someone a house, maybe I did or didn't get, a buyer agency agreement, which I know I should. How do you do that? I mean, and we don't know where or if the seller is going to provide information on whether there's concessions or not. So what do we do when we go to show a home? Like, for every home we have to know, or it's just overwhelming.
Well,
Well, there's
I say don't let yourself get overwhelmed with the unknown yet, because we don't know how it's going to be communicated. It's going to be communicated. I would bet my whole house it's going to be communicated some way, because if you put on the buyer agent hat for a minute, or maybe take it off for a minute, but with the buyer agent hat on, you're like, oh my God, I have no idea if I'm going to make any money from this transaction. Now I have to revisit this really tough conversation, maybe not, with my buyer before we go see the house, right? Because it's only fair to let them know what could potentially be the next step, right?
And I think that's my point.
Take off the buyer agent hat, put on the listing agent hat, and you're like, I don't care how good the market is, I'm worried a house might not sell. Because I sell houses often that move really quickly. And then I have houses that I think should move quickly and are priced really well, and I can't give the damn thing away. So with that listing agent hat on, you got to think, is anybody going to come see my house? And if I can't communicate that they're going to get paid in some way, is anybody going to come see my house? Now, I would never not show a house because they're not offering anything to the buyer agent, because I've done that for FSBOs, as we all have probably if you showed a FSBO, because there's no guarantee, right? But I am going to find out, and I am going to communicate it to my buyer, right? And if I've done a good job, which you need to make sure you're doing, of setting the expectations for the way commissions are paid to us from the listing agent share, typically. But starting in July, we don't know what that is because they're not allowed to list it in MLS anymore. I am not going to jump way down that road until I know how it's going to be communicated. And it's going to be communicated. There's no way it's not going to be communicated. So my approach is double down on setting the expectations for that part of the agency agreement when you do the consult, that this is what we are typically paid and what we typically expect. And as always, if this is not being offered or we're not being protected, that it's incumbent upon you to make up the difference. And I'm going to let you know to the best that I can before we see any house if there's a difference to be made up. And if I don't bring it up, then you're good. Fair enough? Anything else to add?
The other thing that a lot of people on this thing I was watching the other day were freaking out about is, and I think it's a legitimate concern, who's going to sign an exclusive buyer agency agreement with me for 6 months for the first house? There's nothing saying you can't write it for one property. I've done that before. So, if you feel like you need to lead with that for the first time, if people are standing off on you, lead with that. Hey, the state requires me to do this. And now it's a requirement due to this lawsuit. So we'll make it out for this property. Let's go check it out together, and then we can have a conversation if you think I'm the right fit for you in your search, right? There are ways to work around that. But yeah, you are supposed to have one.
So
That makes
just
sense.
explain it the right way.
Is that what that single party agreement is on the previous slide? There was 3 right there. Single party show agreements. What is that?
Yes. Yes.
It is. Okay. That's why it's probably single property.
Because we do it for Triangle and regional MLS areas, right? So the team is covered. But you can do it for one address.
Is there a more simple document than like the 10-pager?
No.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It happens maybe I can't even tell you because the rate is so low that I've had to bring that up.
Sure,
So-
but we're also moving into this new situation. But I hear you in like, don't freak out. And I'm not really freaking out. I'm just, as I'm new in sales, I just want to begin to educate myself on how to communicate accurately with everybody, you know? So
I think this is all a little scary for us that are new in it. Like, I've never had a job where I've had to sell myself to somebody, or been in sales. Like, as a hairdresser, most people came to me. I didn't have to sell myself to them.
girl, you are selling a partial full versus a full. So you are an expert on selling yourself.
Well, that's true. But most people, you know, they come in, they're like, okay, I trust you, do whatever you want. And they're like, okay. So like now I'm having to like sell myself, and like I try to learn as much as I can about this industry and be as informed as I can be, but I'm still, I mean, I'm 4 months in. So like it's still a lot I don't know, and trying to have that information, provide information, and be a valuable asset. It's a little scary with all these changes that, you know, people are gonna be like, oh, well, she doesn't know what she's doing, so let's go on to somebody who does. I don't tell anybody that I've only been doing it for 4 months. I fake it till I make it, but it is a little bit scarier to think I'm gonna have to sell myself to each person. And as you do it a few times, I'm sure it'll be a much smoother process. It's just, it is a little bit daunting and scary at this moment to think.
Connor, how many homes do you have closed and pending?
But I have 4 closed, 1 pending.
In how many months? In 4 months?
So I started end of October, sold my first one in January. So I've had those 5 since January.
Okay, so
amazing.
you realize that 49% of licensed real estate agents in the United States, 49% sold 0 homes last year. And so the changes that you're having to make to your business are the exact same changes that someone who sold 0 homes last year, or someone that sold 60 homes a year for the last 25 years, are having to make. Everyone's in the same boat. So don't psych yourself out of it. And I would think that your ability to close so many transactions in such a incredibly small time frame puts you ahead of the curve, because you don't have to unpack 15 years of doing things one way. I mean, you've crushed it right out of the gate. So, you know, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You already proven you can close. All you have to do is change your language a little bit here and there. But guess what? Everyone you're in competition with has to do the same thing too. So it's not like you're having to pivot where other people are continuing to do what they've always done. Everyone's trying to figure out a way to pivot.
And I think what's really important, Connor, is focusing on the part that you said, valuable asset. And don't focus so much on selling yourself. Be genuine. Be who you are. I've worked alongside of you. You have a great personality. You bring value to the table in what you do and how we do it. Like that's really the focus, not selling ourselves. It's really about how we show where we can add value and be different, and really extend that knowledge. And you do have a lot of knowledge in a short time frame. So
Thank you.
You know, I
Thank
would add
all
on
of
top
you
of that,
for providing that knowledge to me.
you know, Connor, I would add that you clearly are doing it because that's why you're successful already. You know, you might call it something else, but you're doing it and it's working, you know. And I would even argue that in your previous profession, you were doing it. It might have been secondhand. I mean, you prove it to somebody, and then that somebody comes to you because of that. Maybe you don't sell directly to them, but because of what you did for someone, somebody else came. So you're doing what we're talking about, maybe not the way we're talking about it, but it's happening.
Mhm.
And again, all of this should be incorporated into what we're doing already. I don't think it's a massive shift, in my opinion. It shouldn't be
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
having the conversations we talk about having. So
Yeah.
it's just
Business
about,
as usual. It
and
really
when
is.
something becomes required, take the onus off yourself. This is a state requirement. This is a national requirement. any other agent that you're talking to that's not talking to you about this, they're not doing it the right way. Not to call anyone out specifically, but talking generally. It's like when I ask someone, hey, you told me you've seen other homes. Have you seen this working with real estate agents before? Oh, you haven't? Well, we're required to present this anytime we have a significant discussion about real estate. Just want to make sure you know that I'm going to do everything by the book that it's required.
Can I get a
North Carolina-
clarification? Oh, go ahead, Brandon.
Carolina's ahead of the game because we've had buyer agency for years. You know, imagine if you're in a state like I've got a good friend who has a pretty good business in Tampa where they have a buyer agency agreement in Florida, but no one uses it. And he told me a couple weeks ago, he was like, dude, I've been doing real estate for 3 years. I've never once had anyone sign an agency agreement. Well, that's over with. You know, their whole state is going to have to reverse engineer the way that they're thinking. But the other thing I wanted to say really quickly, I don't want to scroll too much, is, you know, I went to a conference last month with about 3,500 real estate agents. And when they ask people to raise their hand if they do a buyer consultation for every single new buyer client that they meet with, I would wager that probably 60% of people did not raise their hands. Okay. And these are all coaching clients. These are all agents that are paying a coach to assist them. That's the only way you can go to the conference. So you've got people shelling out a good amount of money that are not doing things that we're doing right off the rip, you know. So understand that we've got a man on first base from the first time we meet somebody to engage with them. We are doing things that the majority of agents in our markets are simply not ever doing for whatever reason.
And don't assume just because we've had it in North Carolina that people are explaining it the way, you know, right? Right, Ellen? Go ahead, Connor. Sorry.
I thought we had to do the buyer strategy. Like, I thought it was like licensed law to do a buyer
No.
strategy. Is it not?
Oh,
No, WWREA is, but
Yes.
yeah, and that's where I wanted to get clarification. Our buyer exclusive agreement it's not mandatory to do a showing with it. We can still do our first freebie. It's in our best interest to have that agreement signed, but we can still do that first one free, so to speak, without the agreement.
I think that's a gray line.
Is it?
Based on everything I've read, I think you're supposed to have a document signed for every showing before you start showing homes. And so that's why the pivot is, hey, I'm required to do this, and so let's just do it for this one home and see if we click, and we can, you know, we can converse afterwards. But yeah, I don't think you're supposed to show free ones. Now, here's the difference in your business. Do you want to continue to do a one-off for every house that you show, or do you want to say at the beginning of the relationship, hey, so let's do it for this house, and then, you know, we can have a conversation if you think we're the right fit for one another. And then when they ask you to show another one, you got to hire me for 6 months, or, you know, I'm not doing this one-off anymore. You know, that may be different depending on where you are in your business. It may be different depending on, you know, the relationship that you have with a client, right? If you've got some boomtown lead that's jerking you around and you feel like they're just wanting to kick tires and waste your time, you may say, hey, dude, you got to commit to me. If it's a past client, you may say, hey, you know, they're not sure what area they're looking in. Let's do this thing for 30 or 60 days. I don't think there's a wrong answer there. I think it's always better to get the long-term agreement signed. But I think you've got to, unless Doug institutes some policy, which he may, I think you're at a little bit of your own discretion as to how you want to handle that.
So do we feel like it's gonna be different for like an open house? Because if we're supposed to be under agency before we're showing people, I mean, at an open house, have several people coming in who are probably unrepresented. So,
Yep, that's not a showing. You're simply facilitating an open door, so you're protected from that.
okay.
Now,
I
if you
have yet to see
meet
anything
someone
that
and that
says
house,
in sorry.
if you meet someone at the open house and you've prepared ahead of time and they're like, yeah, you know, we really like this neighborhood, but this one isn't for us. Well, there's two more available in this neighborhood. The open house is over at 4. Can you meet me at 4:15? We'll check the two of them out. technically you're supposed to do it in that situation. Yes.
Well, and in that situation, Brandon, would you literally, and I'm assuming you literally need to say, hey, let me grab your email so I can go ahead and send this document over to you so I can show you this home. And then you go into the spiel about the one-off if you want to. But at this point, you literally have to start sending, you have to get emails up front so you can send this over to them, correct?
Well, and if I were to prepare for that situation, if you're doing an open house, go on Loop and download the PDF for working with real estate agents for buyers,
Mhm.
and for print off a couple, because the odds of this happening to you are not enormous. So
Hi.
print
Yeah.
5 or 10 of them off and keep them in your whatever bag you tote around for business, and just have them there at your disposal. And if you have someone who wants to do it, explain to them working with real estate agents, explain why you're required to do this, and then have them sign for that one house and go get it. And if they won't do that, that's a perfect opportunity to say, has anyone sat down to you and talked to you about the buyer agency process in the state of North Carolina, how it's a benefit to you, and the recent changes with respect to the profession? And then go for the appointment, go for the consultation.
Yeah. All right. In that scenario, it actually feels like a good thing, a good way. Yeah. To make that crossover.
You're not gonna be able to close everybody.
Yeah.
But if you're in a situation where someone is begging to be closed, and you have not put yourself in a position to act on that by doing the things that need to be done, that's a you fault, right? That's a you problem.
Yeah.
You screwed that up. So be prepared.
Thank
I
you.
will let you all know if I see something that says that you're required to have an agency agreement to show a house. I've yet to see that. So if somebody sees that, let me know. Of course, it is recommended to do that because it protects both parties, and we're required to disclose our expectation of compensation, right? You can do that without an agreement, in my opinion. But again, if you're starting the relationship and doing the strategy session as part of that first meeting, it shouldn't be an issue. It's just, are you taking the time to get into that, or are you just starting with opening a door and then letting them walk away because they don't want to buy that house? Yes, we're required to have it to represent them and present an offer. Of course, you can't do it without that. So if Brandon, you too, if you see it somewhere that says it's required, please let me know. I haven't seen anything about that yet from North Carolina or nationally. I think we might be seeing information about it nationally because some places aren't doing it and now they're going to have to do it. And what the misunderstanding could be is that now they're required, which in North Carolina, they've always been required, or they've been required as long as I've been in the business anyways. So please let me know if you see otherwise. But until then, I'm assuming things are still operating the way they are. But to that point, get agency, and you can do it for a day, a house, a week, whatever. And coach or, practice having that conversation so you're not tripping all over yourself. Hey, we can do it for today. But if we're working together after today, the next one's going to be for 3 months or whatever. Everybody good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Quick
This
question. If you are working with a new build, do they have to be, so if you're in the middle of a new build or in the middle of a contract, do you need to update your agency to the end, or as long as they went under contract while they were under agency?
as long as they were under agency at the time of contract.
Okay.
This is showing different co-brokers offered, and that based on the percentage of them. Can you guys see this? Okay, I know everybody's screen is a little bit different, but just to kind of give you an idea, it looks like the highest percentage were 2.5. That's being offered and also closed. And you can see this was from middle of February to middle of March.
Yeah, it looks like there's a 3.5 and a 4, even a 5, right?
Yeah, but you see what the
Oh, I
percentage of,
see what you're saying. Yeah. That's
yeah,
the
that's
biggest,
10 listings out of 15,000, 16,000.
gotcha. The
Can't do the
bulk of
math.
the business is at
Yeah.
2.5.
Yeah.
I wish they would add one more column to that and how fast it closed. COM.
That's a good point. Days on market. But, you know, that would be good information, but everything is so subjective.
Right.
So when somebody says there's a standard, well, clearly there's not. Because you've got 12 or so different being offered across the spectrum. All right, let's keep going through these slides because we're having good conversations, but I want to make sure that you all get exposed to these. You know, it's about education. It's about process. It's about value. You know, we're here to make it easier for you, more convenient for you, less stressful for you. We're here to protect your interests. We're here to represent you. Don't you want an advocate? Shouldn't you have an advocate in one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make? Someone who understands the in and out of the process. Know, show, demonstrate. Okay, 90 ways. Somebody shared something like this recently. I think personally, I'm probably not going to roll out 90 ways that we help people, but a lot of this is in our stuff already. And, you know, be familiar with what's in here. You can get these slides from the email that I forwarded you. They're in there. You can go in there and click and get them. So if you want to glean any of this stuff and use it, or just print it so you can reference it or have it in your mind, you know, there are a lot of things that we do.
There was something that Stephen Foley posted that I would love to have. It was literally like a 1-pager, maybe 2-pager, on like 180 things that realtors do that nobody even knows or thinks about. And literally, I wanted to print that off. Not only like I want to like just be able to, but I might use that for like something. I don't know. Do you remember when he posted that?
I don't know if it was him specifically, but I've seen a couple of things like that. Go get it.
Yeah, I need to find it.
Go
Okay.
get it and send it to me.
Yeah.
Now this is really good. And I like the spirit of this slide, but we're not negotiating tax. I don't understand why that's on here. Some of the other things we definitely are. So maybe a scaled down version of this, I think, would make sense. Again, this is kind of applicable nationwide, so I don't know what's happening in other places, but just to show all of the aspects that go into something, you know, to help people isn't just about seeing a house and then filling out a form, right? There's a lot going on here. Half the battle is getting under contract. If it's half, you know, the work happens after contract. Again, you're applying for the job. No, show, demonstrate. This is what we do. What questions do you have about what we do? Do you have questions about how we get paid? Put it out there. Have the conversation.
So one thing, if you scroll to the slide above this one, Doug, that I really like, especially for someone that you don't know, this line, we'd love to onboard you as a client. I think that's a great test close for a buyer consultation or a listing consultation. You go through all the value that we provide. Love to onboard you as a client and provide these services. We can get this process started tonight, right? Go in for the jugular, right? Be prepared to ask for their business. Hey, this is a job interview. It's my job to win your business. But then you got to ask for the business, right? It's just like asking for a review or a referral. You're not going to get them if you don't ask for them. I really like that line a lot.
I think it's great. And I think, you know, it's not here. ABC, baby. Close for agency. All right, here's the next step. Are you ready to move forward? This is what we got to do to move forward. We're ready to start working for you. I'm ready to start working for you. Let's get you onboarded as a client. Don't leave things open-ended when you're done meeting with people. Don't wait to hear back from them. You know, I'm going to follow up with you. Here's your homework. I always like to say, here are our next steps. You got to set those expectations for people. Don't just walk away not knowing what's happening next with them. Even if the next step is we got to start over with our search because what we're looking for now ain't working, right? Always set the expectations for what's next. They're waiting for you to tell them what to do. So make sure you are. Okay. Some of these are repeats. Oh, this is a good cheat sheet about what can be contributed from the seller if we're in situations where we're asking for closing costs from a seller to cover things, you know, like we've talked about for VA, you know, a VA buyer cannot pay our commission, it's prohibited. So knowing that what is allowed for a seller to pay in closing costs or concessions, if that's going to cover our commission, if you get to that point, you don't want to get halfway down the road expecting something and then, oh yeah, the lender doesn't allow that. Now what? Right? So I would revisit that. This is another good one pager here that's got it on there. I've never heard of this app before. If anybody else is using it or wants to use it or is checking it out, let me know.
Oh yeah, I listened to, I think it was a Tom Ferry on Palm Agent. And I forgot what it was, but I remember writing it down, liking it.
It's an easy way to do a seller net sheet very quickly for someone at a listing appointment, but we do
Yes.
that already.
Yeah.
Most people do not do seller net sheets, it seems.
I think they were using it basically as like a marketing tool to like share to your sphere or something. That's what I was listening to anyway.
Okay, so let's jump in a couple of these real quick. These are only like 3 slides apiece. Highlights, we've kind of talked about this already. We are covered. Some of the other bigger firms are paying their own settlements, but we're covered under NAR. Rule changes going into effect in July, like we talked about. Everything still has to be, you know, we don't know if they're going to be appeals or whatever. I guess we'll see. But we're going to move forward understanding that this is the next generation of how we're going to exist and get ahead of it and be prepared and start having those conversations, maybe to a little bit deeper degree than we're having now. Here are the rule changes. You're not required to be a member in an association or MLS to receive compensation. This is really the big one. No offer of buyer broker compensation allowed in Realtor MLS. So if we're reading that, they're saying you can't tell us at all via MLS. So how's it going to happen? We'll find out because someone is going to find a way to do it. There's going to be a new standard of getting the word out. I feel like it might not be by MLS, but it will be some way. You know, I would think that you could link to maybe your company's website if you can't put like a document in there. We'll see. We'll see what's allowed and what's not allowed because there are going to be people that are going to try to tiptoe across whatever line is set there, right? So we'll see. No requirement or unilateral offer of compensation to a buyer broker. Well, there wasn't one before. I guess they're just being really clear about it. Can't create a non-MLS mechanism for the purpose of listing brokers making compensation. So, all right. So they're getting ahead of some of those things, right? Can be listed on brokerage or agent website for brokers listings only. So you can list it on your website. So, you know, I would think that, you know, people are going to say, visit XYZ for commission info or something like that. Are you allowed to use the word commission? I don't know.
my understanding based on everything I've read is that you're playing with fire if you try to cheat on the MLS and agent remarks or showing time by hinting that there's some sort of commission at all. You need to leave it out entirely, and we'll figure out where it's going to be. But it sounds like most people are just expecting to pick up the phone right now.
which everybody will love, and we'll find a way to work around it, no doubt.
Mhm.
Make sure you cannot state services are free. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. They are not free to the buyer. You should not tell them that my services are free to you. That is not true. And that's where you're explaining the actual part of the agency agreement. Must disclose that fees and commissions are not set by law and fully negotiable, right? This says, all right, well, this is the first time I've seen it written. Must have the buyer sign an agreement and negotiate fees prior to showing a property from MLS. Amount of compensation cannot be open-ended, must be specific. Well, that's covered already. Somebody find where this is written officially and not in a slide. And I'll share it with everybody. And I'll look as well. Sellers may offer concessions by MLS for buyer closing costs, but cannot be a specific reference to a buyer agent compensation. Okay. So you can't say seller is offering 2.5% seller concessions for buyer agent compensation. The way I read it, you can do it if you don't reference buyer agent compensation. So that could be kind of a read between the lines thing. Again, we'll learn more as more of this shakeout happens. Anything else to add there? Am I reading that the same way you guys are? Buyer agent may not be paid more than pre-negotiated amount on the buyer broker agreement.
So with that, where it says cannot be paid more, so like usually, we would say for 2.5%, but if you're doing a new build, then a lot of well, I won't say a lot, several builders offer like a 3% commission. So if they've signed for 2.5, you can't be paid the 3% then?
Correct. My advice for this, I think that good buyer agents, and y'all tell me if you disagree, most people assume that it's a 3-3 split. It is not in the triangle. In the triangle, it's typically 2.4% to the buy side and 3.6 to the list side. So I think there's a window of opportunity for really good buyer agents to actually make more money on every transaction, because most people think it's a 3-3 split. And so when I fill this thing out, I'm putting 3% down. That's what I'm going to put.
Because it can be up to, right?
Yes.
Doesn't mean it has to be that.
Okay.
Like,
Okay, so if you have like a new construction or somebody offering 3%, you get that, but if they have to pay their own, then you can let them pay the 2.5%.
yeah, but at the same time, this says that it has to be a specific number.
Not a percentage?
It
No.
can't be open-ended. So
Oh,
you
I
can't.
see.
So you can't say. So you can't say up to 3%.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to say a number, let's like 2.5% or 3%, like you said, Brandon. And if we come across a house
Or a
that's offering
specific dollar
3.5,
amount.
what's that?
Or a specific dollar amount.
Yes. But to Connor's question, if they happen to fall in love and want to buy a house that was going to offer 3.5, we could not collect the 3.5. We could only collect the 3.
Well, I mean, I think, I don't see why there's any reason to think you couldn't strike through and alter the agreement just like you do for a listing agreement when you change the listing dates on it or you extend buyer agency or something like that.
That's what I was going
Okay.
to suggest. Just, do a strike through an initial.
Okay. Oh,
Let's check out these other two real quick.
I'm getting a little lost, I must say.
Don't.
Okay.
this is an appropriate slide.
Mhm.
Confusion leads to fear, fear leads to panic, panic leads to paralysis. So, you know, I
Yeah.
think this is a good approach. Which of the following statements do you agree with most? When you buy a home, you should definitely have someone who represents your interest during the whole process. Buying a home is something you can do mostly on your own, perhaps just with a lawyer to help with your paperwork. Well, I think less people say yes to this than actually do it. Because the last statistic I saw was like 86% of buyers had a buyer representation, had formal representation. Most agents know what's happening. Good agents understand what's happening. Great agents can explain what's happening, right? So practice being able to talk about this with folks.
I did have a good opportunity last night with my core cheerleaders, if you will. I actually surprised myself. I went into explaining what really happened through my eyes, and they were like, "Oh, you really," one of them was like, "You really know what you're talking about." And I was like, "Well, yeah, this affects me. This affects my family. This affects how I pay my bills. Of course I know what I'm talking about." So
I think this is probably one of my favorite slides out of all of these things. Don't get caught up in the media. You can't control that negative or narrative. Instead, call your sphere. Don't try to figure out ways to sidestep the new rules. Instead, work on the scripts for the new rules, right? Don't feel this is all doom and gloom. Like we talked about, there's been huge shifts in the way real estate has done from the phone book to the keyboard, you know, from paper maps to apps, right? Instead, like Brandon said, see your opportunity to rise. You know, the cream rises to the top. Improve your skills and activities. Be focused on this. What should you do? Transparency, creativity, relationships. Action items. I'd love to apply for the job of being your realtor. That's a great script.
Mhm.
You leaving messages? Hey, you came to me. Let me prove why I should be your agent. Right? 3-part buyer consult. Agency, compensation, local information, build rapport. 2, housing needs, wants, how you gonna pay for it. 3, look at homes. Pretty simple, right? Know the numbers, do the math, build your skill at having challenging conversations. Instead of it being something that you're afraid to do, like have a conversation with your partner about bills or something like that, just get ahead of it. Hey, you're probably wondering about all this stuff going on in the NAR. You have any questions about that? You know, I've heard about it, but I don't really understand it. What's it mean? Are you guys still getting paid? Well, let's talk about what that means, right? Lean into your relationships. Now more than ever, you need to be making sure that you're visible to your sphere. You know, your first couple of years in this business, team leads are really important. But if you work those leads and make the most of them, in a few years, they're going to be a lot less part of your business. If you stay visible, if you do a good job, if you share your successes, if you stay in touch with people, right? Those are all hugely important.
Doug, real quick, I did put in the chat if you want to pull it up and others directly from the National Association of Realtors fact sheet. It's crystal clear. Signed agency agreement before touring a home
You put it in our group chat?
on the Zoom.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I will share that now. This is a good script for, I'll get to that. Let's finish these slides. When you bought your home with me, did you pay me? So if you're working with a seller who doesn't want to offer commission, right? Great script to have. You know, paying that forward and understanding why, right? VA buyers like we talked about. All right, let me open this thing from Brandon. Can you guys all see this?
I think it's the third page. Maybe the second. What page was it? Sorry.
New rule about written agreements. NAR has long encouraged its members to use written agreements because they help consumers understand exactly what services value will be provided and for how much. The settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into written representation agreements with those buyers. This change will go into effect in mid-July 2024. After the new rule goes into effect, MLS participants acting for buyers will be required to enter into written agreements with their buyers before touring a home. These agreements can help consumers. So beginning in July, at an undetermined date, I guess, mid-July, you have to have an agency agreement before you can show a home. So my script is going to be, I'm going to take the onus off myself. Hey, beginning July of this year, nationally, I'm not allowed to show you a house without an agency agreement. Typically, I sign my agency agreements for X. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Not, if you're not comfortable with this, we can sign it for one day or for one house. Here you go. But be prepared to have the conversation if someone says, well, I want to commit to 3 years, whatever, sorry. You know what I mean? 3 months. Be prepared to shift. Okay, well, we can do it for 1 month. Well, I'm still not comfortable with that. Okay, well, we can do it for 1 week. You know, you're going to have to be able to have those conversations on the fly. You know, I'm not going to offer 1 week or 1 day or one house up front. That's going to be my last offer. And doing that, you will also want to set the expectation that if we go out after this, we will be signing it for X. That's what I'm going to do. You don't want to do that, that's fine. That's up to you in that situation. But beginning in July, you are going to have them done. So I would start practicing now. Right? And maybe you're not making everyone sign one now, but you need to start figuring out how to have that conversation. Thanks for finding this, Brandon. I have not seen this.
Yep.
Anything else on here that we need to see that we haven't talked about?
Not really.
Okay.
Everybody here is protected.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about any lawsuits or anything like that. So, you know, I think a few takeaways just to kind of wrap this up. I'll share this link with everybody too to follow up after the fact. We know that we're not going to know yet where to go to find out what compensation is going to be if it's offered. So you have to begin, and you should already be talking about compensation with your buyers. We know that a specific amount has to be listed on the agency agreement starting in July, right? We talked about, you know, if you need to edit that, how to go about doing it if you get in a different situation, right? We also talked about what type of loans allow what type of seller concessions, if that's something that you attempt to negotiate or your buyer wants to negotiate if something's not being offered. So again, there are a lot of unknowns and that can be scary, but don't be scared, because we've talked about ways to have conversations, to set expectations, to provide your value so people understand why they're there and why you, right? And how to be able to move and react on the fly to a given situation. Who's scared? Hell yes. No, no, Connor, I don't count that. Don't be. You're fine. We got your back. We're all going to get through this together.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to have these conversations. We're going to continue to share conversations we're having with buyers so we can collectively experience what everybody else is experiencing and the feedback they're getting, the additional questions that they're getting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just trust that we're going to get something from everybody that's going to help us all get better at this.
And we're ahead of the game with all the tools that you've given us so far, right? We have a great seller's guide already, or buyer's guide, right? It's just tweaking it a little bit maybe. And we were already doing the presentations, sitting down. Question for you, Doug. I know you said you were thinking about adding some stuff to the guide. I know as a new agent, I kind of like sometimes when I go to send it, I'm like, oh crap, that page with all the reviews, I'm not on it. So they're gonna look at it and say, oh, where are you? Like you don't sell anything, So is there a way for us to put our rave reviews on the newer folks that just got them? And then I'm thinking, I have this vision of a page that if you could provide a template that kind of goes along with and has the same look to it, that we could actually have our personal page where we insert a picture, have like 5 or 6 bullets about our statistics. And now that we have statistics, right, Connor?
I will do, I will ask Quinn if he can do like a one-off about and review sheet. We used to have an about and review sheet.
Okay, that'd be
That
great.
was, just on a Word document. What I'll do is ask him if he can come up with one for everybody that includes, your headshot, includes your bio, includes some reviews. And then
That'd
we
be
can
great.
edit that. And then you can have it as a standalone document that you can send along with it. Or if you print it, you can insert it in there or whatever.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'll email him about that right now.
Need to update my headshot before that, so I don't look like a Oompa Loompa anymore.
I
Well, you
love
just
your
let me know.
headshot.
Yeah,
I
you
love
I
look
feel
good.
like I looked orange.
My
No,
hair is
I
bright
love
red
it.
and orange.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Everybody says they're like, you don't look orange, but I feel like I look.
Well, girl, like I did mine with one of my friends, and they turned out great. So just
Yeah.
look good and get somebody to take some pictures.
And have
Use a
COVID,
ring light.
apparently.
What'd you say?
And have COVID.
Yeah.
I'll skip that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
I think that I hope this was helpful for everybody. It's helpful for me just to talk through it because I know everyone is going to have a different approach and use different language, and that's fine. Nothing should ever be so scripted that it doesn't feel, organic or like it's you talking, right? But the purpose of this is to figure out how to say it in words that are comfortable for you while still getting across what we need to make sure that we do to A, do the right thing, and B, make sure our folks understand it. Right. So we'll continue to maneuver and stuff. If anyone, there's a lot of material here to kind of parse through. If anyone has ideas, and I made a few from our notes last week that I haven't moved on yet because I wanted to kind of let it marinate for a while. If anyone has, bullet points that we should insert into the guide that you think would be helpful, please shoot me a quick email with them that I can kind of compile and then compress. And maybe we add another little part to the guide about, commissions in general, and just continue to get further ahead of it and put it out there for people to be able to read on their own and disseminate, and then for us to touch on when we go through the guide with them.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that hugely.
I like that. I mean, that would be good.
Mhm.
Well, shoot me an email with some bullet points, and don't feel like it has to be perfect. Just get some ideas out there while you're thinking about them, and then I'll pull it all together and we'll figure out how to put it in there.
Here's one last thing I want to share with a client, whether that's a buyer or a seller. If I can't negotiate for myself as a real estate professional, how effective do you expect me to be at negotiating on your behalf?
Yeah.
Right? Always consider that. I'm not saying you have to drop that line every single time, but I've used that before when people said, I don't want to pay this or whatever. And I think you're going to have to keep that in your quiver for buyers potentially as we ease into the way that things are changing. But I think if you stop about it and think about it, it actually makes sense. You know what I mean? If I can't stand up for myself and my value, you think I'm going to be able to get a repair done for you? I mean, just think about it. Just something to think about. Y'all have a good day.
I
Bye,
love
guys.
that. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye bye. Have a good one.
Bye. Bye.